I got the UR live update
Yep,
on
we're
mine.
we're live. So good evening, folks, and welcome to the Torpedo Fishing Products Thursday night podcast. Tonight, it's actually Brandon and I here, two Lake Ontario charter captains, are going to be talking about fishing on our various waters and how things are going. What's working for us. So what's neat about tonight, and we've got both myself and Captain Brandon is you're going to get a view of, say, the South Shore with Captain Brandon, and you're going to get a bit of a view, or I'm going to call it an early view with myself, Captain Marc, fishing the North Shore. So with that, we might as well get started. I see folks joining, and that's fantastic. So I'll start by just doing an introduction of myself, and then Captain Brandon. So my name is Marc. I'm captain of Kings Landing Sport Fishing. I'm based out of Bluffers Park Marina in Scarborough or Toronto, Ontario. I'm on the North Shore. I run the Kings Landing Sport Fishing charter boat. It is a 1989 Tierra 2700 Open. So with that, maybe I'll just throw it over to Captain Brandon for a second, so he can introduce himself and tell you a little bit about what he runs and where he is located. So Brandon, over to you.
Yeah, Captain Brennan White, Rochester Sport Fishing Charters. We run out of Braddock's Bay, just outside of Rochester, New York, on the South Shore. We run a two-boat operation, one larger boat out of Braddock's Bay, like I mentioned, and then a smaller Lund as well, jumping from port to port based on the fishing or what we're trying to um, go after, where the bite is.
Awesome. So today we're gonna Brandon and I are just gonna give you guys a bit of a report as to what's been going on our various waters, what's been going on, I should say, how we've been making out with our trips, and what we've been up to and what's working. So Brandon, maybe start off a little bit with you on the South Shore. Usually early season, it is more of a South Shore game. I know that's especially on the Canadian side, but I know that on the American side also. Maybe talk about what's been going on for you the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, because I know you've been on the water for quite some time. I remember talking to you in March and you were already on the water.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I know it is almost June, but for about a week and a half now, we're already starting to see our transition period starting here. For the lake to set up. A couple weeks ago, we were still fishing for browns. We still had some colored water in there. On occasion, we're getting a day where uh, we got a good plume outside of our port or a local port that we can go hit a bunch of different species. There's been so many different species being caught in the colored water around here. And we actually just did a podcast um, with a new group, and the podcast is called On the Water Again. It's based out of the um, South Shore. The two gentlemen, Mike and Tim, are out of the Rochester area, but they kind of cover the um, whole shore itself over here. And we kind of went through and talked about again what's been going on, LOC, derby fishing, how we got started, and tips and tricks, things that we think are most important. So you can go check that out on Facebook or YouTube and kind of get a little bit of background knowledge on us, as well as you know things that we think are the most important to do. But with that being said, kind of go back to your original question. When we're losing that color, we have tons of cold water everywhere. I was out, I think, 3 days ago doing a little bit of testing on some electronic upgrades and some changes I've made, and I had 52 to 53 degrees on the surface, 51 like maybe 20 feet down, and then under that like 49 degrees everywhere. So we've kind of, and I'll talk about it more. I don't, I'll let you get your little intro in. But we've been having to change up tactic, and it's not nothing new to what we typically do. But it'll be hopefully some good information for anybody that uh, encounters the same situation that we are, which happens every year.
Yeah, so for me, I'd say this is what I call early season. So I'm on the North Shore. That being said, I think it was second weekend of April. I had the opportunity to fish the Canadian South Shore, fishing in the King of the Lake tournament, and I tell you, it was some great South Shore April fishing. I can't remember the exact number of teams. It was a lot of teams, and I think almost every team boxed out. So it was pretty cool to see. So on the Canadian side, by St. Catharines, Port Weller, Port Dalhousie, the fishing's been pretty lights out. Um, I'd say the king bite was really really good. The coho bite is absolutely insanity. Like the cohos are everywhere, and even obviously the Lakers are always willing to play even when you sometimes don't want them. So that's where my season started a few weeks ago. For me, the boat just got put in the water. So it got put in not this past Monday, the Monday before. So, for me, the weekend was my first time on the water, doing some shakedown trips with family and friends as I get ready to take out some customers. Water wise, I was very happy with what I saw. We had 51, 52 on the surface. So I think similar to you on the South Shore, but on the North Shore where I was fishing between, call it Scarborough Bluffs or the Bluffers Park Marina where I'm located, and the Toronto Islands. And then the down temps was similar. I think about 20 feet down was about 48. And then as I started to get further down the column, I think I was seeing 45, 44, around 40, 50 feet. And then obviously below that, it started to get cooler. So with that, Brandon, before I talk about what my trip was like, or what my trips were like in the long weekend, when was the last time you were out, and how did the trip go?
So, and I can talk about this more once in the future, once I'm able to test it out more. And if anybody has already tried this out, they can reach out to me and maybe gives me some tips and tricks. But if not, I feel like I'm probably one of the more handful of people that's going to be trying this out first. So over the winter I installed the autopilot by Lowrance, and basically for anybody that doesn't know, the Lowrance autopilot runs off of your actual screen itself versus having like a separate touchpad or turn knob like you do with a Ray Marine. So the problem I was having obviously is that um, my controls were at the helm where my graph was. And I was under the impression that having a Lowrance that gives you the options to mirror on either a phone or a tablet, I was under the impression I was going to be able to use what I had been using as a secondary graph with that mirror option to basically use the controls that were on my graph and control my autopilot. Well, come to find out, like your phone, when you're driving, your phone says, "Hey, I know you're driving. I'm not going to let you text, or I'm not going to let you pick the next song," or something like that. Found out really quick that even though it lets you mirror everything else, it does not let you control the boat from the tablet. And I was not aware of this before. So, long story short, um, I had to do some research, and it turns out you have to add um, a wireless controller, kind of like you do with the options you have with a lot of the other autopilots. But you also have to add a Bluetooth antenna, is basically what it comes out to be. It's a super simple install, but getting it to work and work it the way that you want is totally different. And trying to pair the two. Anytime you're trying to pair anything wireless or dealing with electronics these days, there's so many switches and buttons and plugs. And as electronics keep growing and becoming more intuitive, it just becomes more complicated to set them up, and what works with certain stuff doesn't work with other things anymore. So anyways, I installed that remote control, that wireless remote control with the Bluetooth edition there. And so I was kind of messing around with that a little bit and just doing a little bit of fun fishing. And the one thing that we had noticed, and I put right to work, and this is just as a few days ago, is with that cold water being everywhere, Um, I'll be honest, on some days, your best bet is to cover the water column and try to narrow down a bite. And some of the, obviously, we could talk about that for a long time, but the couple of tactics that we use to help us find that bite quicker is running free floating cheaters on our downriggers so that we're not missing any high fish. And um, and again, running high lines. So our downriggers are the deepest. Our dipsies are just above them, if not deep in that area. Um, and then we're running 5 colors, 7 colors, 3 colors, 10 color, and kind of just putting a little bit of everything out there, seeing what goes, and then making changes based on what's been working. And what we've been finding out after the trips is talking to other people is that most people are fishing below the fish. And with that cold water everywhere, we say we get in 50, 60 foot of water, start dropping lines, head straight north, and, wait till we hit some fish and then plane out. And we're getting a ton of fish in the upper water column. And one of the easiest ways that we were able to find that is with the free floating cheater. When those start going off, it tells you the fish, your fish are way higher than you think that they are. And then we just made adjustments. And again, that's why we were able to find out 5 color was 5 color and 7 color were the hottest. And then free floating cheaters, and basically in that like 35 to 50 range was where the majority of fish were that we were finding.
Yeah, so interesting, interesting and a lot of similarities actually. So last Saturday was my first trip out, and it really wasn't a trip; it was just a fun fish. Had my dad and one of his buddies, and then a couple of my friends. So 5 was on the boat. I was really just trying to figure things out, do a shakedown, make sure everything worked. I have installed a whole whack load of new gear and electronics on the boat this year, a full Garmin setup with 2 9-inch, a 10-inch, a Panoptic system, a network hub. I also had installed a new planer board mast connected to my Cisco electric reel. So it was really truly a shakedown trip. And a couple of things I'd say. Love the Panoptics, love the Garmin, but also I resisted for a long time putting a planer board mast on the front of my boat, and I kept having my pulleys off the hardtop, and unfortunately my lines were too far back, and they would get almost when I turned they would catch my rods, and I'd be worried about ripping a rod out. So I put a planer board mast on, and my comment there is I should have done that. I should have done that 3-4 years ago when I got this boat, but I've done it now. But early season, so never know what to expect. So very similar approach. I didn't want to go too crazy, so I just ran a 6-rod spread. On the Canadian side, we can run 2 rods per person, but I just, even not going to run 10. I said, we'll just run 6 rods, see what happens. And so I ran 2 downriggers. Started with one with a spoon, the other one with meat. I think I had one of them around 35, 40 feet. I threw out 2 divers, 1 mag, one standard. And then I put out a couple of jump lines. I put out a very similar deal. I put out a 5-color, and I put out a Torpedo weighted steel, 200 weighted steel. And for me, where you go north, I go south, right? So I trolled south until I got to about the 120, 130 line. And then I made a beeline west towards Toronto because I'm just east of the downtown Toronto or the Toronto Islands. And anyone that knows the water I'm fishing, I was fishing what we call the drop, where there's a huge drop off where it suddenly goes from like 70 feet to 150, 200 feet like that. And I was fishing. I started off just east of what we call the filtration plant, which is the Toronto Water Filtration Plant. And we had no bites around the filtration plant, which is a pretty hot spot typically, a month from now. Where our bites started to come in was closer to the city, where I got to what we call a Leslie Street Spit. There's a couple of, chimney stacks. And once I hit the first chimney stack, the 5-color went, and that was the first rod. But as we trolled towards the Toronto Islands or the city, you could visibly see the water color changing and the water warming up and getting this green, scummy water. If you kind of go directly and look from where that was and look across the lake, if you could see far enough, you'd actually be looking at the Niagara River. And I think that's the Niagara River kind of pushes the water right across the lake. And that's why early season in front of the Toronto Islands is usually quite good. So For us, every single rod fired. So we only had the 6 rods. Every rod fired. I never changed up. Like I had the 5 color, the 200. I did bring a diver down. Sorry, I did bring a diver down deeper. So I think I had a diver down about I think it was 72 feet. And you might say, Mark, how do you know that's precise? And I'll tell you in a second. And then I had another diver at 29 feet. And part of also my electronics upgrade, I put the new Troll Smarter 2 system on, where you have probes that go on your lines. So on your divers, on your long lines. So I was testing it out and playing with the divers. So I knew exactly where my divers were. And then as I got bit on the deep diver, then I dropped a rigger with an anchovy down to 100 feet, and that got hit. So for the first trip out on Saturday, it was incredible. And I'll start by saying it was a mixed bag. You know, our biggest fish was maybe 10, 11 pounds. So it wasn't like we weren't catching monsters, but we went 14 for 17 in our first trip out early season.
Mm-hmm.
So that was incredible for us on the Saturday. You know, what was crazy though, we fished and we slept in. Like I didn't even leave the dock till about 6:15 because there was no rush. It was shakedown. It was shakedown. About noon, you know, weather was quite warm. We said, we've had enough. Let's just turn around. Boat's working okay. Let's go back in. You know, literally, we get into the dock. So we get to close to the dock. I'm about to throw the boat in reverse to back it into my slip, and I get an emergency warning sound, big heavy siren. Long and short of it was actually the emergency warning of my phone, because they were calling an emergency warning for the storm that went through southern Ontario, and I think you probably got remnants of the storm and on the New York side as well. We missed being on the water by about 10-15 minutes. The storm literally came out of nowhere. Like 1 minute it was sun is shining, we decided to pack up, and just this storm whipped through. So very fortunate not to be out there. Fast forward to Sunday, just myself and one buddy. We just went out with 4 rods. Again, I was playing around with the Smart Troll some more and the Garmin Panoptics, and you know, we started in around 130 feet in front of that spot called the filtration plant, and I started marking a whole ton of deep hooks. Like we're talking 100 and below, 100, 125, even 130 right in the bottom. Pushed out a little deeper to 170, and it was still below 100 to 170. There was just hooks all over. So I dumped both riggers down pretty deep. I think one was about 100. I think one was 125, 130. I'm going from memory now. Both with one with meat, one with an anchovy, and they started firing. I think our biggest king was 12 to 14 pounds. You know, we went 5 for 6 in about 3.5 hours before the wind picked up again, and we could see a bit of a storm coming in. So we got off the lake, but some really good early season action on the North Shore. You know, real good mixed bag, especially if you're looking for fish for, you know, table fare, good eaters, some really good eaters. And I'm finding the fish, they're not picky. Like they were, you know, I had 2 spoons, 2 flies, 2 meat. Like I wasn't willing to commit to something in particular, and everything went off. So pretty good. What's been working for you over there?
Yeah, for the most part, we've been full spoon program, mags on our deeper lines, and there is, you know, we get a decent amount of cohos in Rochester, but when we're out in the west end near Wilson, if we're ever fishing down there, you're getting a ton more cohos, and that's where, you know, a lot of them are coming on our 3 colors, our 5 colors. Getting some kings up there too. Lakers, again, like you said, on the bottom. On occasion, we'll throw a flasher fly down there if the spoon isn't getting them going and we're marking them, just to create a little bit more vibration. And yeah, I think, I'm trying to think, yellowtail in both mag and a standard has been a real good spoon for us as of late. Everybody knows I always talk about the Jordo XL by Warrior. That one's been real good on a 3 color. And actually, you know, talking about adjusting your spread, I was running a 2 3 colors first thing in the morning, and they were taking hits. And as the sun started to come up and they started to slow down a little bit, again, I didn't want to fully commit and fully take away both my 3 colors. But I just took a red offshore clip with a 2-ounce snapper on there, put it on the 3 color, just to get it, just a touch deeper, and that ended up going off. So that's something that is an easy change. You don't have to have a ton more rods on your boat. But again, that Jordo went off again, and that was going off both for smaller kings and for cohos. And I think we're seeing a lot of small kings, which is just great for the future. The fishery. Obviously, we're letting the majority of all of those go, and we're seeing 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-olds and mixed together, which is great. The only problem is that when you don't know they're on there.
Yeah, no,
You got to
I hear you. For me, I'd say interesting for us. I'd say I talked about the Torpedo weighted steel 200 that it was a great rod for us on Saturday, and I had a flasher fly on that. So just a green blade with crushed glow on both sides and some black and green dots with a green and glow fly. That thing was almost like a pickled sunshine fly. That thing was a machine. It's funny enough, like I have a 200, a 250, a 300, a 350, and a 400 weighted steel on the boat at all times, and I'd say the 200 and the 250 are by far they're my studs, and I use those with flies pretty much religiously all year and all season. Spoon wise, I'd say this would be probably one of my very popular spoons. This is a hot fish. I think he calls it a G spot green, green spot here, and you can see it's just crushed glow with green dots. I also was running a custom shoehorn that I painted. It was a white. I painted the front side white with crushed glow, and I put orange dots. I'd love to show you that, but I made a mistake trying to hand bomb a fish in, and it snapped off, and I lost it. My mistake, my fault. But some good. Those were on my. I'd say that's what was on my long lines, and but as the day progressed, I flipped over to meat, running a hot fish flasher and a meathead on some of my customs from my company projectsalmon.ca, and then I was also running another one of my customs with a glow anchovy head on the other rigger. As I'm talking though, Brandon, I have a question for you. Have you guys caught much for Atlantics yet this year? Because we are getting a lot of Atlantics already early season.
Yeah, we only got one so far. It was about like a 9 or 10 pounder, which was awesome to see. But that's the only one that we've gotten so far this year.
Interesting. So my first trip out, we got one, and again, first trip. I was talking to a couple of other folks that got 1 or 2 a trip, and then someone else I know, I think he got 5 on Monday. So we're seeing a lot of Atlantics, and not just small ones. Like he got a pretty big one. Probably I'm going to say 10 pounds. So it's good to see some of these Atlantics coming back. Hey, we've got a couple of questions coming in, Brandon. So let's answer a couple. I got a question from John Thompson asking me a question around what's the difference between the PS30 versus the LVS 34 Garmin transducers. So, John, the best way I'd say this is the PS30 it's an older transducer. It has a wider beam. It's a 40-degree beam. It's a much heavier weight transducer, and it's designed to be transom mounted. It is what most trollers use. The PS30 has the ability to scan it has more, I want to say it's got more sonar beams, and it can actually read much deeper. So typically lake trout, salmon trollers, and even folks that jig for lake trout really deep will run the PS30. The LVS 34, which is the brand new transducer replacement of the LVS 32, it's a much smaller, more compact transducer. Super popular with the bass guys, the crappie guys, the walleye guys. It's got the new live scope technology where you can see the fish swim and you can see their fins. Whereas and you can kind of see my Panoptics back here. The fish in my Panoptics are blobs. On the live scope, they actually look like fish. Like you can see the movement of the fish. The only challenge is it doesn't have the 40-degree cone. It doesn't have the wider cone. It's got a 20-degree cone, so it's much narrower. I know someone that's got an LVS 32 on their trolling boat, and they had it mounted in the center of the boat. They couldn't even pick up their downriggers on the LVS 32. It also doesn't really go as deep. So that would be, I'd say, the biggest difference between the PS30 and the LVS 32 or the LVS 34. the LVS is the new live scope technology. That being said, narrower beams, and they don't go deep enough. They can't read deep enough right now, based on everything I've been hearing. Full disclosure, I have not used an LVS transducer, but that's what I hear, and all my research tells me. Some other questions we got here. Let's see. I got a question here from Russell. What size divers? I think I mentioned that, Russell. For me, whenever I use divers, for the most part, especially when I don't know where the fish are and I'm trying to kind of feel things out, I will always run one mag, one standard. I am a slide diver guy, so I'm running slide divers. So I like the long leads, but I will always do one of each. I kind of set my boat up with a bit of an opposite. So if my starboard rigger is high, my starboard diver is deep. If my port rigger is deep, my starboard diver is high. That's just how I do it. And then I'll make sure the long line I put out has some separation as well. I just find to get less tangles that way.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the same exact thing. I was thinking, I saw that question, and I was going to mention that with that we do the same thing, because obviously a rigger at 100 we want to say 100. Let's just say 50. A rigger at 50 and a diver at 50. That diver is going to be way far behind the boat, 50 feet down, and the downrigger is obviously right below the boat. So you're hitting 50 at two different ways, and I think that can make a huge difference. When you're trying to narrow out water, and I don't think enough people do that, is having those opposites. So I was going to say the exact same thing there. And yeah, for the most part, if I'm fishing my divers above like 80 feet, I'm using a standard, and if I plan on going, closer to 100 foot down, then that's when I use the magnums. But again,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm more about 70 feet, but same thing really, right? Interesting thing. So as I mentioned, I just put the Smart Troll 2 on the boat, and I've already learned some things about my divers, and some of them I intuitively knew, but it confirmed it. So first thing, I've always kind of gone with this rule of thumb in my head that a standard diver, you need a kind of 3.2, 3.3 to 1 ratio, and a mag diver was kind of 2.3 ratio. What was interesting, I mentioned I had a diver at 29 feet. The 29-foot diver had 66 out. So, when it was shallower, that diver was actually more 2 to 1. As I start to push the divers out, and then the next day I was playing around, I put 165 out, and I was about 48. So you can see as your diver stretches out, the dive curve does change. It's not a linear line.
for sure.
So that was the first thing. The second thing is you'd be surprised that surprised, or maybe just you don't have the data. Now I have the data, it's interesting. Your divers might be at one depth trolling one way. So if I'm trolling east, it's one way. You flip around the different currents, your diver depth can change by 6, 7, 8 feet. And I saw that, call it in real time because of that Smart Troll device. If I wasn't doing this tonight off my cell phone, I'd show pictures of what the Smart Troll looks like. If you want to see, I posted some pictures on my Facebook page. You can look me up on Facebook. It's just Marc Kulak. It's I got the post public, but you can see some screenshots where you can actually see what the temperature is and what the depth is.
Yeah, we have that. We're waiting for our Smart Troll 2 as well to come in. So we're excited to have that same option as well.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Hey, we got another question here, Brandon. Maybe I'll let you start off. And I'm new to torpedo divers. What is the best release to use?
Yeah, if you're talking about, I'm not sure what this question's geared towards, but I'll just answer it both ways that are in my head. If you're talking, maybe 3 ways, I guess. We run black releases off our downriggers, which is directly on the cable itself. If you're talking about release for a downrigger, I usually go with the black offshore tackle release. If you're fishing for smaller fish or lighter biting fish, then use the white one. If you're talking about for our, like the snapper that I was mentioning earlier, I use the red offshore clip with the pin in it. And if you're talking about releases on a planer board, I go all over the place depending on what I'm running, anywhere from the light light pinched yellow offshores all the way up to the Scotty downrigger clips, or the ones that I've found hold the heaviest lines the best. So like your 300 coppers and up, I found that the black Scotties with the neon green end hold those the best.
Yeah, I'm similar. So I my riggers, absolutely, I use a black style release. They're my own version of it that I have on my site, projectsalmon.ca, but similar idea. Only difference I have is, and I kind of borrowed this trick from another captain, Ivan Shawa from Get It Wet. He's also a Torpedo pro staff, where I don't have the release in a fixed position. I actually have it floating on the downrigger cable. It's got about 18 inches of float with a stopper. And that way, to your point, you talk about those small fish. If you get a small fish, the fish will swim the release up and down, and you'll see your rod tip go up and down. So that's what I do. And then, similarly, if I'm using like the Torpedo style weights, like I will use those with, similar to you, I use the red clips with the pin in them, and then on the boards, I'm like all over the place. So if it's a light line, 3, 4, 5 color, maybe a 100 weighted steel, I'm using small little just black clips without a pin. And as I get larger, I actually use the Amish releases. So they're the ones that actually float on the line, the orange ones that you can use with elastic bands, or you can kind of twist your braid backer and clip it in.
Yep.
That's what I will use. That's what I'll use there. Okay. I think we're pretty much at time. We've been about half an hour. We've had some good questions, but it's probably time that I ask the question of the week. Actually, you know what? We got one more question coming in. It's for you, Brandon. So let's throw it over to you. Brandon, can you go over the lead core setup we ran last year? I think it was a 5 or 7 with a Torpedo diver. Tell us the secret, Brandon.
Yeah, Derek's gonna have to remind me a little bit more of which specific time he's talking about here. I'll give him a second to be more specific. But while I'm waiting for Derek to type that, if you haven't already liked and shared this video, make sure that you do. It'll get you into the spin the wheel for next week. The spin the wheel winner from this current week is Jeff Richards. Congratulations. He'll win the same prize as the Q&A winner. Again, so you like and share the video, that puts you into next week's potential to win the spin the wheel. Let's see here.
Let's see if Derek. Here we go.
Yeah, while we're waiting for Derek to comment there, one thing I can't stress enough is, and I'm just seeing it happen over and over again with people that aren't having as much success as us in the last couple of weeks, especially when these fish are spread out, is that we're noticing they're making two major mistakes. They're driving over the fish, and they're fishing under the fish. So that's one thing that you never want to do. That's why I mentioned, running. Anybody can run a free floating cheater, and it doesn't hurt to throw, like you said, a junk line out there, a 3 color, a 5 color. If you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of options, this is great for a deep diver. Actually, that's what I was doing. I was running a 3 color with a deep diver, and then a 3 color with a spoon. Imagine that deep diver probably goes about 7 feet down. So that's a great option too. If you don't have a ton of options, in your pocket, let's say you're newer, you don't have a ton of options. I always tell everybody to go with a smaller lead core setup, because you can run 3 color with a spoon at 12 to 15 feet down. You can add a deep diver to that, gain yourself another 7 to 10 feet, if not more. Then you can add and then get even deeper, and you can throw that 2-ounce snapper in there, and then you can get even deeper. So there's a bunch of ways to run your lines without having a ton of lines on your boat, if that's just not what you're set up for. So just having those tools to make some adjustments, and that's exactly what I was doing. Because it's like, this stuff works. It's just you need to make sure you're in front of the fish.
Yeah, it's good advice. It's good advice, Brandon, because I know I was telling guys, and I have my own channel, Kingsland Sport Fishing on YouTube, and I was telling some guys on one of my reports, if you're going out right now, and to your point, you got to cover water. So I'm like, if you can get a buddy or two, and that way you can cover, like on the Canadian side, it's 2 rods per angler, so you get 6 rods out there. Or I think on your side it's 3 rods per angler, get 6 to 9 rods out. Even if you don't have a big board, get a couple of inlines. You want to cover the water, and they could be small inlines. Get your inline boards up high, but right now you got to cover water for sure. So Derek said it was the way you did it on the Monroe County Pro-Am. It was the way you ran that was a first for me. He really liked the setup.
Yeah, and I think he's describing what we just talked about. Basically, just about using that line and then adding a weight to it. And just making it a little bit more universal. So I'm pretty sure that that's what he's talking about. It doesn't hurt to have those high lines out there. And like I said, I even made the mistake the other day. I dropped down in probably, I want to say maybe like 70 or 80 foot. But by the time I legitimately got all my lines out and, had my speed right and, the whole shebang, I probably was closer to like 90 or 100 feet and kept heading north until I hit about 180, 200. And the farther I got, the deeper I got, the more the bite slowed down. So I spun around. And by the time I made it back to that 75 depth, which I noticed the temperature was higher there as I was getting away from it. I was like, I need to get back in that warmer temperature. Came back, I noticed on the fish hawk, came back, and the second I got back in that 75, I started hitting them. So that's a big thing. And I even made that mistake was driving over the fish. So it does not hurt to start in shallow, especially if you don't know where the fish are. That's the main thing. If there's not a thermocline set up, you don't know where the fish are, you don't have colored water, don't set yourself up for failure and drive right past them.
It's a good point, and that's my advice almost all season long. Like if you've got fish close to your boat ramp or close to your marina, don't and you think the fish are at 150. Don't just blast out to 150. Like now I've learned, like I'll start setting up at 40. And for me, I got a kicker. I'll drop the kicker. I'll start setting up. Yep. Because I want to be set up before I get to the depth of the fish. But 9 times out of 10, we bang fish before we even get close to that 150 mark. Yep. So don't turn around because we're actually happy with what we're seeing. So do not drive over fish. Like that's really good advice. Okay, so let's get this thing wrapped up and ask the question of the week.
For sure.
So the question of the week here is, what marina am I, Captain Marc, based out of? So I've said it a few times in the video to kind of help you guys out, but what marina am I based out of in Toronto? And while waiting for some answers to come in and see if someone gets the right answer, just a reminder that we have these every week. Make sure you like and share this post. And our winner is Bill Molnar with Bluffers. So yes, Bluffers Park Marina is the marina that I'm based out of in Toronto. Great marina. Lots of charter boats here. Lots of recreational fishermen, and right by, I want to say the world famous, but maybe not world famous, but the Lake Ontario famous, the Drop, which is just a huge underwater cliff that pulls in the bait and pulls in the fish. I'm just gonna check something right here because I got James saying that he beat you, but according to what I'm seeing here, and Brandon, I think you can probably validate, it's showing us that Bill answered it first.
Yeah, they both at the same time with Bill. Bill was first. And just thanks everybody for tuning in. And I'll just mention too that not only did Kip and I do the interview with On the Water again, who has the Facebook page and the YouTube page. They did probably about an hour-long interview with us. We're also speaking, I believe it is June 2nd. It's a Thursday, June 2nd, at the LOTSA meeting. It's the Lake Ontario Trout and Salmon Association here on the South Shore. So we will be speaking that evening. I believe we're speaking around 7 o'clock. So if anybody wants to come down, ask questions in person, meet us, anything like that, again, we'll be there. And great time to talk fishing, and just as I had tonight with talking to you, Marc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think likewise too. I think Brandon and I think we both believe we're pretty personal people too. So if you see us in the summer or when we're out, you see us at the dock or at the boat ramp or whatever, don't be afraid to come over, say hello, introduce yourself. We love fishing. We love talking about it. That's why we run charter boats, and that's frankly why we do these podcasts, because we love talking about it. So don't be a stranger at any means. I love when I get to talk to different people at the dock or at the marina. Anyways, with that, Brandon, thank you for joining me this evening, and big thank you to everyone watching today. Really appreciate it, and make sure you dial in next Thursday, as we have some of our peer Torpedo Pro staff sharing what they've got going on. See everyone later.
Good.
Have a good one.
Thank you,
Be safe in the water. Bye, guys.